So today we're going to talk about a pretty exciting new macro lens. A while ago, Laowa reached out to me and asked if I wanted to review a new 180mm macro lens with a max aperture of f4.5, hinting that it would be a pretty lightweight lens despite the long focal length, and also a maximum magnification of 1.5 times, which is more than any similar lens on the market for full frame cameras. And actually, if we start by looking at what other lenses exist that are similar to this lens, there aren't that many. The only one that has been released recently that I can think of is the Micael 200mm macro lens that I did a review of, but which wasn't very good. It was very heavy, very long, unwieldy, bad image quality, so it wasn't super exciting. So if you want something good that has this kind of long focal length and macro capabilities, you have to look at old lenses. For example, the Canon EF 180mm f3.5, which is really old for Canon DSLRs, which you can of course adapt to modern mirrorless cameras, but it's still a very heavy and long lens. You also have the Sigma 180mm f3.5, which I guess is kind of a copy of the Canon. And then you have the Tamron SP 180mm f3.5 and the Nikon Nikkor 200mm f4. But all of these are really old lenses, really big and heavy lenses. And yeah, they are good optically, but they are not like modern lenses suited or made for mirrorless cameras. So that is pretty unique with this new Laowa lens, and if it performs well, it is a very unique and interesting option for macro photography if you really need long reach and a long working distance. And as you might know, working distance with a macro lens is defined as the distance from the front of the lens to your subject when you're shooting at high magnifications, like 1x magnification or 1.5 times magnification. And you might also know then that it usually correlates very closely with the focal length. So for example, a 90 or 100mm macro lens usually has a working distance of around 10-11 centimeters at 1x magnification. And I measured the working distance on this lens at 1x magnification, and as expected, it's really good. It's around 20 centimeters. And if you're shooting something like butterflies that are quite big, you might want to use a lower magnification than 1x. You might want to use like 0.25 times. And then you actually have a working distance of around 71 centimeters, which is quite a lot. So this is a great lens if you want to shoot skittish insects like butterflies or maybe dragonflies. Then something like this can really come in handy. When Laowa asked me if they could send me this lens for a review, I was excited by the fact alone that it was an 180mm macro lens. So I said yes immediately. And then when I put the lens on my camera and started shooting with it, I accidentally discovered that it also has autofocus. I never expected this because pretty much no other Laowa lenses earlier has had autofocus. I think they have maybe one wide angle lens with autofocus. So I was actually kind of surprised that, wow, this lens has autofocus. But there is a catch, and the catch is that you can only use the autofocus on distances longer than 1.5 meters. So basically you cannot do autofocus in macro photography with this lens, which doesn't bother me at all. At macro distances, you focus manually by just turning the focusing ring, and it works great, and it actually feels like a fully mechanical manual focus, the kind I personally really prefer when doing macro photography. And you can actually see that when you turn the focusing ring, the front lens group here moves mechanically by me turning the ring. So there's no like electronic coupling as far as I can see that moves the actual lens elements. But then if you focus all the way to infinity and then go beyond this little click here after infinity, you get into AF mode. And that's so nice because then this becomes kind of like a dual purpose lens. It's great for portraits or maybe some kinds of wildlife where a moderately long telephoto suits. And I had a lot of fun just taking portraits of my wife and just shooting things at a distance with this lens. So that is one really good use case. And then of course you have all the macro capabilities where you are limited to manual focus, but me personally, I don't see it as a limitation. I actually think it's pretty nice that you can do fully manual focus for macro shots. Let's talk a little bit about the build and the design of this lens. As you can see, they are going with a bit of a new theme here. The lens has like a blue-violet tint to it, although it looks kind of black, but still it has this kind of blue tints to it, and I personally think it looks pretty nice. And the build is of course excellent, as we have come to expect from Laowa lenses. The lens is all out of metal. It comes with a really nice metal lens hood as well that has the same color as the rest of the lens. And besides the autofocus capability, we also have a button here that we can bind to anything we want in the camera. This lens comes for a few different mounts. You can see them listed here. So it's not only SONY, and it's of course a full frame lens. Another thing about the physical build is that we have a USB port on the lens. So for future firmware upgrades, that's great. The lens has a 62mm filter thread. There is like a weather sealing gasket on the back of the lens. So it seems like Laowa has started doing this now for all their lenses, at least the latest one that I've tried. So there is like a rubber gasket here. Great, feels good to have that in case you are out when it's raining. And this lens feels pretty lightweight for what it is. It is rather long, as it of course needs to be because of the focal length, but when I weigh it, it is 521 grams for just the lens itself without any caps or without the hood. And that is pretty lightweight for a lens like this. I mean, another alternative that you could possibly think about is maybe buying something like a Tamron 70 to 180mm f2.8 lens. And that lens is 810 grams. So while that is a very lightweight 70 to 180mm lens, this one is still lighter. Of course, the maximum aperture of f4.5 is not anywhere near f2.8, so that's also something to consider. Then I asked Laowa about the price tag. I figured maybe they are venturing into autofocus lenses to be able to make more money. They can increase their margins, charge more money. They can compete with more expensive brands like Sony itself and Tamron and so on. So I was expecting it to cost maybe $800 or $850 or something like that. But actually they're saying that the price tag is $499 US. So at that price point, I think this is great value for money, considering the excellent image quality and that it has autofocus. And autofocus, it worked well. I didn't have any issues with it. It worked well. One time when I started the camera, the lens kind of bugged out and I couldn't use the autofocus. It just didn't work. Then I turned off the camera, turned on the camera again, and everything worked. So maybe that's like an early bug. Maybe it's also because Laowa aren't that experienced in making autofocus lenses yet. So hopefully they will just release firmware updates that will alleviate any such problems. But I just wanted to mention that that happened to me once. I went out to do some insect macro photography with this lens. I personally have a really hard time doing insect photography at long focal lengths like this one. It's not maybe the lens's fault. I think it's more the focal length and that I'm not really good at taking good photos at this focal length. So here are some photos that I took. I'm not super happy about them, but I just want to show them. At least the image quality is great. This lens seems to be very sharp at all apertures. There are no other obvious problems with the image quality that I could spot. So yeah, as we have come to expect from Laowa, it's pretty much flawless when it comes to the image quality. So who is this lens for? I think it is for anyone who has waited for a lens like this, a long focal length macro lens, 180mm, that you can use both for portraits, some wildlife, and also for macro photography. And especially if you like to shoot butterflies and like small flowers and stuff at a distance and wants to have a good working distance, then this is probably the only good option on the market, unless you want to use really old lenses for DSLRs. And at $499, yeah, I mean it's great value for money, and I can recommend this lens. Although I would not personally use this for insect photography, but I think maybe that's more like a personal taste thing. I really have a much easier time taking good macro photos of insects at shorter focal lengths, like between 50 to 100mm. If you decide to spend $499 to buy this lens, I really encourage you to also spend $44 to learn macro photography from the ground up. Learn how to take great macro photos. You can do this by purchasing my ebook, my macro photography handbook, 126 pages with everything I know that is worth knowing about macro photography. Go pick up my ebook at the link in my video description. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and thank you Laowa for lending me this lens. It was a lot of fun to try it. See you soon again.